This is Ruth on July 10th at 2:59 p.m. Central Standard Time, interviewing Samir Paroo for the Voices of SMU project. This interview is being recorded using Zoom. I am located in Dallas, Texas, and Samir is located in Irving, Texas. Good afternoon.
Hi, Ruth.
So just to begin, can you tell me when and where you were born?
Yeah, I was born February 21st, 1979, in Toronto, Canada.
Awesome. What was your neighborhood like?
So we grew up in an area that was outside of like the main core of the city, but it wasn't necessarily a suburb per se. It had that feel to it though. But it was very much a closed off neighborhood, townhouses that were there, and we lived in an extended family setting. So it was my parents, my siblings, my dad's brother, and his like my aunt and my cousins, my dad's sister, my grandmother. So all of us were kind of together, um, and the neighborhood around us was. I mean, I would say that it was like what you would probably compare to like a middle class type of neighborhood in the U.S.
Cool. Can you tell me a little bit more about your family,
Mhm.
the extended family?
Yeah. So my family were essentially my parents and generations back are from East Africa by way of India. So we're I identify most with like the East African Indian like convergence. Um, my parents migrated to Canada in the 1970s when a lot of the like African nationalization was happening within countries that they lived in. So in Uganda, the rise of Idi Amin, in Tanzania and Kenya, there was this new nationalistic field that was coming through. So they essentially entered Canada as a refugee, and that's when they essentially started their particular life. So, in terms of the family, right now we moved from Canada to the U.S., and I spent most of my life in the U.S. In terms of the structure of the family, my parents are still alive, and I have a younger brother and younger sister. My brother's married, lives in California with his wife and two kids. My sister lives here in the Dallas area. Um, I think beyond that, my grandmother was really a very wise woman, and her husband, my grandfather, had passed away years before I was even born. So she pretty much, like when the family was moving, when her kids were moving from East Africa to North America, like this is a time when there's no cell phone. This is a time when like it's very difficult to keep in contact with folks. She managed to help with that movement of the family, and in that, um, there were two really amazing pieces of guidance that like she made sure that all of us knew. One was like, you know, take advantage of education in whatever way you can. And two, it's not necessarily just about you and your parents and your siblings, but our family really constitutes this like huge group of people. So my cousins are as close to me as my siblings are. And we have 16 cousins on my dad's side. All my aunts and uncles are super close. So when I talk about family, it's more on the lines of like the extended family, because that's how we grew up. And it was interesting. We had a family reunion in November, and so many of the pictures as we were growing up were with cousins in cities that we never lived in. But our parents made such a um, commitment to make sure that all of us got to know each other, um, and we grew up with each other, that it was actually it is still a pretty beautiful thing that we are so close. So yeah.
Wow, that's really awesome. So you said that your parents made the journey from East Africa to Canada.
Hmm.
And it was because of the rise of nationalism. Where
Hmm.
in East Africa did they live?
Yeah, so my mom actually lived in Congo, and then my dad he was born in Kenya, but he was living in Congo at the time. So it was not really East Africa, more Central Africa, but my dad bounced between the two countries. So yeah,
That's cool.
yeah.
And then once you were born, you guys moved again to America. What
Hmm.
prompted that move?
Yeah. So we moved to one of my dad's brothers was diagnosed with cancer, and um, there was a business opportunity, and this is kind of what we did, right? Like we helped each other out. So when he came across this business venture, he called my dad immediately. My dad was like, all right, like, and clearly my uncle didn't have like a lot of time left, so it was very much of like, how can this be something sustainable for two families, and really make sure that um, my aunt and my cousin were also taken care of, if anything were to happen to my uncle. So that prompted a lot of the move from Toronto to Florida, which is like that was our first point of entry into the U.S. So yeah.
That's awesome.
Mhm.
So, what role did culture and or religion play in your household,
Yeah,
coming from a lot of different backgrounds?
yeah. So I grew up in as a Shia Ismaili Muslim. So um, we religion was a part of the growing up experience for us. I mean, I think it was like partially like when I was reflecting back on even my like childhood, and even having traveled to East Africa and to places where my parents grew up, religion was always the center of their community. So they lived in these neighborhoods where it would be almost like private neighborhoods because of our religious community. Of course, the businesses, all the interactions would be outside of those neighborhoods. But at the very center was our mosque. Um, and no matter what, at the time of prayer, which for us is in the evenings and in the mornings, you would just go there. And it was something that everyone did. So whether you did that for religious purposes, whether you went into that space for social purposes, um, there was always this connection back. And I think as our Ismaili community started to migrate from Africa, from India, from Pakistan, and so many other parts of the world, they lost um, that they didn't lose their identity, but they missed that feeling of having the mosque as somewhere, as something so accessible. So even in these newly developed Ismaili communities in the 70s in Toronto, it was very much along the lines of um, establishing the prayer center, and that's where people would congregate. That's where people would meet. That would be um, more than a source of just coming back to the faith, but that would be a source of friendship, of celebrations, of cultural events, and so on and so forth. And I think that's how I grew up. I grew up in that particular space, and I'm still very much connected to my faith, um, because not only of the actual physical place, not only because of the prayer, or the friends that I've like my lifelong friends are within that space, but also part of the ethic of being an Ismaili Muslim is service, and through serving others in the community, I've also become very close to that. I think the culture piece um, has definitely played an impact. I mean, it's something that I see every morning when I wake up in the mirror, that I'm like, I am brown, I'm of Indian descent. When people call my name, like it's an Indian Persian name, so it's something that I hear, and I think that it did play a role. Um, I mean, even coming down to like the very basics of like what we eat, right? Is we eat the food from the communities my parents were from, because that's what they ate growing up, and those are the recipes that their ancestors passed on to them. And I think that looking at culture from just a very practical lens, I guess, I was surrounded by it. So it was definitely very, very evident in my upbringing. And every time I do go back, and when I do travel to Kenya or Tanzania, like it feels so much like home when I go back, because there's so much that I feel like I have in common with the land. So whether it's the food, the language, um, even how I look or dress, like those are pieces that are very, I guess, have been very profound in my life.
It's very unique.
Mhm.
Um, how would you describe race relations growing up?
Yeah, it's interesting because I've been doing a lot of thinking about this, especially recently with what's happening. Um, I think that the South Asian population in Africa um, was very, very unique, because they came to Africa even with a sense of privilege. Because how they were under British rule for so long, and Africa was under British rule, and they brought these Indians in, or South Asians in, to help with business and help build economies. So they came with a sense of entitlement. Um, and I recognize like that. And I think that that kind of navigated even the way my parents think and talk about race when they were growing up in communities where they were being served by, although it was the majority population, a Black African population, um, but my parents were in places of privilege, in places of power, whereas the majority of the population wasn't. So when they were migrating to North America, they automatically came with that lens of like, there's distrust, right? There's a power that we have over others, and I think slowly it's been really interesting, even watching my parents go through their levels of like understanding, right? Of what race relations look like in the US versus what it was like for them growing up. Um, but we grew up in a neighborhood where we were often very cautious. So cautious, one, because we were the minority, right? And cautious, two, because there was no community around us, and three, there was so much unfamiliarity that existed, right, in a new place. And I think that that's something that was very, very, I was made very aware of growing up. That, you know, even in the sense of like taking risks with who I become friends with, was something that was really, really interesting in our household. Um, we always played it safe, and it was the other brown kid that we were friends with, the other South Asian kid that we were friends with, or the person from our mosque that we were friends with. So I think that's what it was like growing up. Having said that, um, I think it's been a very interesting, I feel very awesome journey that I've been able to be on in terms of exploring like what my identity is like, and how I fit in to this larger community society that we all live in, and what my role is, and how we're all able to be interdependent on each other. And I think that that's something that um, and realizing and recognizing my privilege, and what if I step into a room, like what what biases I have, and what privileges I have. So and I think my parents, like seeing them go through that process as well, has been really, really exciting. I mean, there have been, walls just being broken that I see that have been established because of their childhood, now crushed, um, which has been a really, really great thing to see. So yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So, did you grow up mostly in Florida? And what was that like school-wise?
Yeah. No, I definitely grew up in Florida. I was a total public school kid growing up. When we actually migrated from Toronto to Orlando, we actually, the neighborhood we lived in was not a very affluent neighborhood, because we didn't move with that much in terms of like resources, especially financial resources. The school setting was much more ethnically diverse than what I was used to, growing up in Toronto. And I think that I mean it was really cool to be a part of that and to see that. Um, as we moved around into different places in Florida, like I saw the school systems, like in the school environments, change a bit as well. Um, but uh, but it was always we always lived in very diverse areas where it was accepted to, for the most part, um, um, where it was accepted. Um, School was I spent 10 years. So in terms of growing up, yeah, I grew up in Orlando, because I pretty much spent 10 years of my life there. We moved to Dallas my senior year of high school. So there was a bit of like that transition and that separation that took place. Um, but I often, even the friend group that I had, the social group that I had, especially as I grew, as I became older, um, it was made up of just some really great people. And as much as I say, like I yeah, I mean, it didn't, yeah. So it was just, it was really good people, regardless of where they were from, where their parents were from. Like it was, they were one thing that I think we all sought to find, um, were individuals that were kind. Um, like looking back on really how those like friendships were built, but they were built on caring and kindness, which I think in middle school and elementary school, like that's what you get taught, and that's like we I think we practice that. So yeah.
So you mentioned that you moved to Dallas your senior year of high school. That could not
Yeah.
have been easy. So can you tell me a little bit more about that? Like, what was your high school life like,
Yeah.
especially moving last year?
Yeah. So it was really interesting because I moved from like a high school of like 370 people where I knew everyone, and I mean it is what it is. Like I was like active, um, into a high school with a graduating class of, I think there were 1,200 of us in the graduating class. Yeah. So I it was like I remember my first day, and one, just being so overwhelmed by the campus, um, but two, just the sheer number of people, um, and for me, it definitely like overwhelming, but at the same time, very very unique. Um, and I say that because, like, going back to like my faith community, we have summer camps in our faith community. And the summer before, or 2 summers before I moved, I went to like a sleepaway camp, a residential camp, and had met a lot of people from Dallas, not knowing that I was going to move there. Um, so I feel like my transition was unique in the sense that I had actually stayed in touch with folks, and I connected when I moved. It was really easy for me to, um, just to be able to like be put in a place where I had a social network already, where I knew one person in this huge like 1,200 graduating class group of students. I already knew one person, um, and I think that like that was super helpful. If I didn't have that, I'm not sure what would have happened, um, but it was really really helpful to know that, like, as difficult as the move was, there were so many bright spots that existed.
Um, so what led you to SMU? Why SMU?
Yeah. The so it was never on my radar screen actually up until I moved to Dallas. Um, I think part of it was the proximity to where my parents lived, and they lived in Plano, it was I mean, the other piece was it was a good school. Like as I started to do research, I realized that like academically, like it was what I was looking for, even in terms of fit, right? I think like I was looking for a place that had smaller classrooms. I wasn't looking for the University of Texas. Um, I was looking for a place where I knew that I need to show up, right? And if I was not there, like someone would realize that I wouldn't be there. And that was quite honestly, like that was the mindset going into SMU, that I went with. Um, but I mean, the practical reason, like it was in my parents' backyard, so it was again like safe, for me. I was a first generation college kid. So we didn't know. Um, I mean, for us, this was all brand new. Sending a kid away. Um, I probably like opened the door for like my brother and sister. My brother went farther away for school. I went further away for grad school. But I think this is part of what I felt I needed to do also. Um, so yeah.
That's awesome.
Mhm.
So, what was SMU's reputation among your community?
Yeah, it was very, very good. So when I told people that I had been accepted to SMU, people were very proud. So reputation-wise, amongst, I think the Asian community or South Asian community, in the Dallas area especially, um, people were um, people were really, really impressed. I mean, so this is just like time perspective, right? Like this is the late 90s. Um, I graduated in 1997 from high school. Um, and I think that like it was still, I don't know. And you know, what I think about is I wonder how people um, were basing their judgments. I mean, academically, yes, SMU was a great school. But SMU also held this notion of being an elite school in so many ways. So elite in the sense that it was private, right? Elite in the sense that it was majority white. Elite in the sense that like business was a top, like a top major, that people that that essentially people like studied. And being from a South Asian background, like you only had two or three fields that like you could probably get into. So I think where where I see their perceptions coming into play were the law school, the engineering school, the business school were all really, really great. So yeah.
So, what were your expectations coming into SMU? Were you aware of the stigmas that SMU is associated with?
No, not at all. So like in my research, it was interesting because I don't think that like did I visit campus? I may have visited campus once, but it probably was on a day where there were no classes. So I couldn't see what campus looked like, right? You see the physical buildings, but I couldn't see what the people looked like. I couldn't see the makeup. I couldn't see Greek letters, which I knew nothing about, right? Like I couldn't see any of that prior to coming to school. So the simple answer to the question is no, I was not aware. Um, because even in the research that I did, like it was very much like this is a time where we had dial-up internet, so you can only be on internet for a certain period of time. So it was smu.edu, and like I got to see the pretty pictures of campus. I got to read a little bit more about the campus. I heard from alumni, but no one's going to mention, like, at least the people that I spoke to never mentioned any of the stigmas, like any of the things that I should be mindful of as a um, as a South Asian kid, because I was a kid at that time, entering college. So there were very different types of conversations that I was exposed to.
Yeah. Do you think if you knew those things beforehand, would you have still chosen SMU?
That's a really good question. Maybe because again, like I felt like what I was looking for from a university, um, where the boxes checked, the proximity to where my parents lived, small classrooms, um, a safe place, a good education, those all still existed, right? And I think that I I don't know if I would have, and I actually like I don't know if I would have understood what people would be if they provided feedback. I don't know if I fully would have internalized and understood as I would today what their stories were trying to reflect or teach me. Um, so yeah.
Oh.
Mhm.
So, whenever you got there, how welcoming was the school when you first arrived?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the it's interesting because one of the most I'll use the word memorable, but one of the most impacting moments that I had um, with SMU was on move-in day, um, and being from a first generation, being a first generation college student. They don't tell you that like you should move in with your family, right? And that's what people do. So I literally showed up by myself in my car and moved in alone. And I see like all the families moving in around me. And I'm like, all right, so this is what I should have been doing. Note to self, tell my brother in 2 years when he goes to school, right? And I think it's part of that journey, right? And I don't like, there's nothing good or bad about that. It's just, it left an impression on me. Um, I think that, I lived on campus, like that's move-in day. I lived on campus for 3 years, 2 years. I lived on campus for 2 years and then off campus for 2 years. Um, but I mean, I don't think in in my in my first year, um, there was a defining moment in my first year. Um, I was involved on campus, and I have a feeling that this is like somewhat similar like of different types of groups on campus. But one of the first groups that I joined was the Indian Student Association. Um, and I mean, that was my people, right? Like I knew, like it's safe. And I think that one of the one of the first things that we did was like the older students, the juniors and seniors, the wise students were like, all right, we're forming an intramural team. Like the whole point of the organization and what they wanted to do was to really showcase like the university. They wanted to build community. Like there were key things that they were trying to really make us do. Um, and I thought it was, I mean, at the time you're doing them because someone tells you to do them. But like so we joined this, we put together this flag football intramural team, and it was it was a male team. It was across years, but we played a fraternity, um, and I'll never forget. Like during the game, somehow things just got out of hand, and the next thing you know, like we were being called racial slurs, um, and it was to the point where like they were, it was hurtful. Like it was really, really, really bad. um, it did turn out to be this whole debacle. Like we got into like it was this there was a physical, like it built up into a physical fight. Um, and I remember walking away from um, that moment. And this was probably within the first. I would say month and a half that I was a student there, I never really like I realized I was different, but I never really felt different, like up until that moment. Like I never really felt like I never belonged, um, up until that moment. Um, and I started to realize this so much more. Like the next day, I would go to class and look, and I'm like, there's no one that looks like me in this class. Like I would go to the dining hall, and I'm like, why are like we are the only like South Asians, the only brown people in here. We're all sitting together, and no one else is like approaching us, right? Um, and I think that like for me, um, I think I'd always felt safe, and part of it could have been my like pure naivety in this whole like coming to college and it should be safe. I'm paying a lot of money. Like it's this is I'm paying for all of this to be covered, including my safety. But I never realized that like at that point, that's not. It seemed like SMU had taken um, like just taken that away from me at that point, or that fraternity, I should say, took that away from me. Um, the good thing that came out of that situation um, was like there. I mean, I hate to say good, but like I felt like there was some. I felt like we were heard and some justice happened because members of that fraternity were severely punished, expelled from the university, and I felt like that was like, all right, like this is they this is something, right? Like their action is standing behind something that they believe in, and maybe they do believe in us. And I think that that was something that was really evident.
Wow. So you mentioned that you were part of the Indian Student Association. What other clubs or organizations were you involved during your time here?
Yeah. So I was involved in quite a bit, but my first year, like it was really, I think it was that transition coming into to college. So it was the Indian Student Association. There was an organization called Asian Council, which kind of managed the East Asian Student Association, Indian Student Association, the Korean student, like all of the Vietnamese student group, like all of the student organization. They were basically the umbrella organization. So I had applied for like a freshman leadership position um, with with that group, and um, I got it. I as the years like started to progress, uh, there were there were individuals on campus who they would come and speak to us like from student activities. They would come to our like ISA or Asian Council retreats at the beginning of the year, and one person, um, he actually two people that came my sophomore year, I'll never forget. They they essentially saw me present something. I forget what it was even, and they're like, listen, like you should come by our office on Monday and like check us out. Like we're the Office of Student Activities. There's 100 and some odd clubs and all of that. And I'm like, well, I'm kind of happy like with my people. Like I'm good. And they're like, no, 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 come by. Um, and like from there, like I think they saw the potential like in me, and really like provided me with opportunities. Um, so I got to be involved with an organization called um, Leadership Consultant Council. Now I think it takes, I don't even, it takes a whole different name, or it has a whole different name right now on campus. Um, I was able to be involved with Program Council, which is a pretty prominent organization on campus. And through being president of program council, I was also able to like sit on various committees and boards and like have a seat at the table, and not only represent my program council lens, but also represent so many other perspectives and lenses that I felt like I was bringing with me to some of these meetings. So yeah.
So what did your social or friend group look like at SMU?
Yeah, it started off as very, very like if I were to look into a mirror, like I would basically see all my friends. Like they looked like me, they sounded like me, they spoke like me. We had very similar interests. And um, yeah, like I said, I think my sense is that um, like this happens like when other Indians come into a new space, you look for, and this is how our families were when we moved to communities. Like we look for the local Indian grocery store. We look for certain things. Um, but yeah, my friends looked like me. I think as my time evolved on campus, um, my friend group also evolved as well. Um, and I was still like I an amazing group of South Asian friends that I still keep in touch with almost daily. Um, but I, I, I realized the kindness that existed in people um, at SMU, and I, and that wasn't just because of like the color of your skin or where you're from in what city you're from or where you went to high school. Like I did realize that like people are kind regardless of where they come from, and I think my social group evolved in that way as well.
That's awesome. So, moving to academics, I see that
Mhm.
you majored in corporate communications and public affairs.
Yeah,
So, what did you hope to do with that? Like, what dreams did you have to
yeah,
pursue?
yeah. I wanted to go into like PR. Like I wanted to be a public relations expert. I felt like I could, um, be one of those people that like just responds and is very responsive and serve on a team to look at like the image of individuals and organizations to assist them to elevate uh, them. So yeah, that's what I wanted to do. That's not what I do now. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want to get to that real quick.
Yeah.
So, within that department, how did race relations manifest? Were there other Asian
Yeah.
students in that field?
There were, but very few. And we were generally a very small department at SMU. Um, very, very few. And I think like when you talk about race relations in that particular department, what I found really interesting and very, very comforting um, was the professors were super open. Um, I would say because of the experiences that most of the faculty had in that department, like they were well traveled. They were working for organizations that themselves like were very, very diverse. So they had various they had so many they had exposure with the world, and that exposure with the world informed their perspectives. And I would say that like I was so happy just to be a part of that like group of people who were so forward thinking.
Um, did you find any mentors during your time at SMU or even within that department?
Yeah, I did. I did. So definitely within the department, there was a professor. Um, I don't know if you want me to name names, but I can like name names too if you want. Yeah. So Dr. Rita Willock was a professor there, and she is incredible. I mean, she's what mentors do really well is mentors are able to find um, they're able to find the gifts that individuals have and really try to amplify those gifts and allow that individual to amplify those gifts. And Dr. Willock saw that. Um, the individuals in student activities saw that. So Arlene Manthe, Michael Dean, Michelle Espino, like those are three individuals who, like they, if it wasn't for those three individuals, I probably would be living a very, very different life right now. Um, but they were my inspiration to pursue my passion, um, and help me realize what my passion was too. But there were definitely mentors that I found along the way at SMU.
So going back to wanting to do PR, but not doing that right now,
Mhm.
what did that journey look like? How did those mentors kind of guide you to what you want to do and to what your passions are?
Yeah, you know what I realized was, because of my involvement in various student organizations, my I would communicate often with the advisors of the groups. And the advisors of the groups, the people that I mentioned, like Arlene, Michael, and Michelle, they were individuals who, um, they they were individuals who, like, really based their work in theory that came to life in practice. And I didn't realize that until I started talking to them about, how did you get a job at SMU? What did you do? What did you study? Um, and the more and more I spoke with them, the more and more I realized that there is an opportunity to work in higher education, and there is an opportunity to really affect the lives of future leaders, which is what they were doing. Um, and I think that that was something that I realized that I wanted to do and I was good at. Like I felt like I was able to be a full-time mentor, right? Like I was able to um, really work with students and student groups. I was able to have conversations where I could challenge and support others, to promote their own personal growth and development. Um, and I think that they really, really influenced my decision to get into the higher ed space, and really look at student affairs as a way of moving. And it was interesting as I was talking to like Dr. Willock in my department, um, because I had this dream of being doing something in PR. Um, it was really interesting that we started talking about the transferable skills that one learns in that major, and how, regardless of really what I decided to do, there is still so much that I've learned that I'm able to contribute in whatever team I join or whatever experience that I have. Um, and it made that transition into higher ed just so much more smoother and so much more powerful. Um, so yeah.
Awesome. So, how well did you feel that the South Asian community was represented at SMU? And if they were not well represented, did you think that had an effect on you?
Yeah, it's interesting because again, like during my, like until that one incident, I didn't realize I didn't realize that, like I knew like I looked different from others, but I didn't realize that that's something that I should intentionally be looking for. Like how many professors of Asian descent are there? How many support staff? Like do people look like me at that university, that like where I can be also inspired to do what they do? And um, I realized that, um, like probably going into my sophomore year, I realized it even more. Um, I think that there were definitely professors of South Asian descent, in particular departments, um, and I would have a class or two with them, and it would be really, really great. Even Asian descent, right? If you broaden the microscope. Um, but I felt like at the end of the day, like what I realized, and again, this goes back to that experience of the fight and what happened after that fight. What I realized is that there may not be someone that looks like me in every department or on my residence floor that's an RA, or in the office of student activities, which is where I spent most of my time. But what I realized that is the university still made a statement to support who I am. Um, and I think for me that was really, really helpful. Um, do I expect the university to change? 100%, absolutely. Because if we can't get a seat at the table, no one's going to understand our perspective, no one's going to understand our story, right? And no one's going to understand why that's important to, especially for incoming students, to hear the fact that, you know what, it's still a white campus. Like it's still, this is how people still feel. But at the end of the day, I think that some of these things, like I will still like fight for that, and I did while I was a student. Um, but they do take time. Not that that's an excuse, but they do take time. So I do want to recognize that the university, um, like I felt supported, and the university I think has changed over time too as well.
Interesting.
Mhm.
Did you ever feel that administrators or faculty or even students have tried to push the model minority myth on you?
Um, yeah and no, yes and no. I think I don't, and maybe it was because of the faculty that I came into contact with. I don't think they did. Um, but I do think it was students. Um, it was, there were definitely students that um, that made comments, that um, had false expectations, um, and I think that like that existed, right? I would wonder if it still exists today. My guess would still be yes, but that existed, especially when I moved into a very non-traditional like major for a South Asian or an Asian. Um, I wasn't becoming a doctor. I wasn't becoming a lawyer. I wasn't becoming an engineer. Like it, I think it like even shattered people's like expectation of what we as a community are supposed to do. Um, so I think that that was part of, um, it was interesting to see and have conversations around that, especially around what are your parents going to think? What are others going to think? And that even came from within the South Asian community. That came from my friends that looked like me. Um, but but I would say that those perceptions of model minority, those expectations of being in certain career paths, they came from students more than they did from others on campus.
Interesting. Is there anything at all that you believe students, faculty, administration, or whoever else is part of the SMU community can do better or should continue doing?
There's some really amazing professionals at SMU. Like I do think that um, I do feel that way. You know, I think again, like one, just being able to elevate stories, I think is so important, and being very intentional about that. So making sure that as you're forming, or as SMU forms their boards, as SMU forms their committees, their teams, being able to have representation at the table is super important. I don't think that that's happening all over the place. Um, I'm sure it happens. I know it happens in pockets, because I'm still involved in some things, like being an alum. That's, I don't know, I guess it's 2020, so I graduated 19 years ago. But I do think that that's something that, you know, SMU, I would want them to be very intentional about. I think the, you know, with what's happening, with what's happened and happening in the world situation, um, I would expect SMU not, and I know that they've responded, like President Turner sent out multiple emails, um, but I would expect SMU to stand behind their emails and require, um, faculty and staff to go through like some type of, whether it's sensitivity, whether it's cultural bias, whatever it may be, but to be informed and educated. And really, if this is an educational, since this is an educational institution, to root themselves in education around these topics. Um, because I do think that there is a huge opportunity for folks. And like I said, there's really, I've had really a really great experience from that perspective, from interacting with faculty and staff, right? I probably only interacted with 10% of the people at SMU, if that. Um, and that's not to say that the other 90% are not good people, but my intention behind saying something around this prolonged training program, or at least being intentional about it, is how can we make this campus safe for everyone? I shouldn't have to be involved in an incident that where I'm being called these racial slurs, um, to understand that, like, you know, and watch a student be expelled. I shouldn't have to go through that process to feel safety, right? Like I should, through your tone, through how you approach me, through how we're speaking with each other, that should be there. And I think the same should be true for students as well that come into campus. Like if we do if we're trying to build a community, right? The pure definition of like the word community is when people come together. Like what does that look like? I don't need to agree with you, right? But I want to be able to understand your perspective. And I think being able to teach students that this is probably really the only chance you'll get in life to be able to ask someone a question, um, and do it in a way where it comes from a good spot, um, just to be able to learn. And I think that that's one thing that I feel every SMU student should walk away with. Um, I know the tagline right now is around building global leaders. Um, I don't know if how much that's practiced in like on campus, because to build a global leader, you need to have vulnerability, you need to build empathy, you need to be able to have perspectives when you come out of campus that will inform how you work with people. Um, and again, like I don't know how intentional that is. Um, and I think that those are pieces that, as an educational institution, if we don't make significant investments around that, it will be, we're, we will be stuck into this like frame of, we're gonna be a majority white campus. We're gonna be minority, like Black, Asian, Latino, like, and that's just how it's gonna be. And I think that like those are investments that we make. And I think the third piece is, outside of the training element, I used to work in university admissions, like hiring people that understand the populations that you intentionally want to bring on campus. Um, and that requires significant investment as well. But that investment will reap decades down the road. And I think that that's something that, when I would go to India and recruit students from like these villages that just didn't have anything, but to say to the students there that, listen, I have 2 scholarships. I want to make sure that like we provide you with a sense of education so you can come back and really change the quality of life for your family. But what those 2 students don't realize is when they come to campus, the stories that they share with others inform how those other people in their community will make decisions, and how they'll look at people that come from not only India, but how they look at the pure potential of individuals that may not look like them. And I think that that's something that, again, like the university needs to be intentionally mindful of. Sorry, that was my soapbox of what needs to happen. But I think that there are three critical pieces that SMU really needs to undertake, and really has if they want to be a leader in this field, like they have every opportunity to do so. The door is open, whether they step inside of it or not. I can't control that, but like the door is open.
It's a very powerful point. So now that you said you graduated 19 years ago, and remind me again, what years did you attend SMU?
Yeah, 97 to 2001.
Okay. Um, so what was post-grad life like? I know that you mentioned that you pursued grad school,
I did,
and what
yeah.
and where?
Yeah, I went to grad school in a tiny town in Illinois, um, called Macomb, Illinois. I went to Western Illinois University. So going back to like the conversations I had and with people working in student affairs, I realized that that's what I wanted to do. So pretty much the most of my senior year was spent writing applications and taking the GMAT and just being just doing all of those things to get into a good grad program. Um, and thankfully, like I got into some really amazing programs, and I chose Western. Um, um, Again, like for me, it was a personal decision to get the perspective of what it's like to be in small town America, and like there was literally like this is a place where you have a town square, you have four traffic lights in the city, and the most happening thing there is the Walmart, right? Which just literally became a Walmart supercenter while I was in grad school. And that was like, that's it. Um, so I wanted that experience, um, because I felt like that was a voice that I hadn't heard growing up. I always grew up in big cities. And it was a really great grad program. It still is, I believe. So yeah, that's what I did.
Well, that's awesome. So, can you tell me a little bit more about what you're doing now? And
Yeah.
how do you think SMU played a role in what you're doing? You mentioned that you went to India to give two scholarships to students. Can you tell
Yeah.
me more about that?
Yeah. So I've worked in higher ed, for a while. Um, After leaving grad school, I worked at Northwestern University, and I coordinated leadership programs. And then after that, after 3 years of being at Northwestern, I worked with like my faith community, to do some youth program consulting. So I would actually travel to various parts of the world and help like individuals in my faith-based group put on camps for kids and put on like really like strategically look at what how they can engage other Ismaili Muslim kids, in their communities, and do something that's powerful and intentional and sustainable, for them. After doing that, I actually worked in East Africa. I worked in Kenya, for a couple of years at a school there. So I was an assistant, head of school, so like an assistant vice principal, and I managed the non-academic portions of our high school. So sports, I worked with, like the pastoral care program that we had in school. I started a leadership program, and then I also was the guidance counselor. Um, when I was doing that, we had many recruiters from universities that had come to visit. In my last year, one of the recruiters was like, "Hey, we're hiring. Are you interested?" I'm like, "Yeah, I mean, I'd love to travel the world. Like, who wouldn't want to do that?" So I applied for a job at the University of British Columbia, and was very, very fortunate that I received that job. Um, and I think it combined the international education piece that I wanted. That's the job where like we had a really amazing scholarship program at UBC. And when we went to recruit students, yes, I mean, not like I think everything about international students, and again, like the conversation happening right now about international students being kicked out of the US, like the international students bring with them money. Like it's how colleges and universities pay some of their professors and their teaching staff, and how they sustain, some programs that they work on. But there's also this group of international students that um, that may not have the means to do that, that depend on scholarships. And we had a really rich scholarship program at UBC, where we looked at pure merit of individuals. And merit didn't always reflect on your grades, but merit reflected on what your potential is, to make an impact, in your community. Um, and I think being a part of that process and a part of that university, and having traveled to so many cities, and being at, like, I mean, I part of my experience would be going to schools in South Africa, a couple hours away from Johannesburg, in really small towns, but meeting the presidents of various African countries, their children who would be enrolled at those schools. Um, and then part of my experience would be being in Johannesburg, working with, like, Oprah's leadership school that she had there, and speaking to some of the students that needed extra financial help with their education and were looking for a way out, and trying to figure out how I can work with them to be able to get them access to some of these scholarships, to provide them not only for, like, themselves, but to provide, knowing that if we could assist a couple of people in that community, the ripple effects it has, like, on everyone else is huge. Um, so being able to do that, and it was not this way of, like, of coming in as, like, a messiah with, like, money, um, but it was done from a place of how are we able to, like, really try to figure out if this is the relationship that's best, right? Um, and I think that's what it was like. A few years back, actually, in 2014, 6 years ago, um, I got a call um, from someone who's a mentor of mine. He's like, listen, we're starting global camps within the Ismaili community. Would you be interested in working, for the program? And I'm like, all right, cool. Let's talk about this. So we spoke about it. 2014, there were two camps that happened in Kenya, and we had about 120 participants from 24 countries or 25 countries, um, and all Ismaili Muslim kids from around the world. And this is the first time that they're coming together. And it was absolutely incredible. Like, I realized then that I had combined my love of travel, my experiences from travel, my educational background, and just my passion for being a mentor, right? Like, I think I combined all of that into one to find a really incredible opportunity. So now I am a senior program officer with a program called Global Encounters. We put on programs now in multiple countries. We affect over 300 young people a year, if not more. And during COVID, um, we are crazy enough to plan a program. It's happening in 2 weeks, and we have 1,000 kids from 39 countries, that will be logging on virtually, for camp, so that they still have something, along the lines of a summer camp that they can say that they were a part of this summer.
That's really amazing. So do you think that SMU has helped you in, like, your journey so far? And if so,
Absolutely.
how?
Yeah. If it wasn't for being involved, if it wasn't for Arlene and Michael during my sophomore year telling me to come to student activities, right? Like, that was a game changer. If it wasn't for them telling me, why don't you come by on Monday? I still remember that conversation. It happened on a Friday. If it wasn't for them saying, come by on Monday, and if I didn't feel safe, or if they didn't make me feel safe in that student activity space, um, and and share the opportunities that existed, not only share them, but really, like, hey, like, this is something you should do, right? I felt like they were invested in me. um, that changed my whole trajectory, um, because I could have probably been in PR, if it wasn't for them having that conversation with me. But instead, I went the higher ed route, and I believe that's when doors opened up.
Awesome. So where do you see yourself in the future? Where would you like to be?
Yeah, I've been actually thinking about that a lot. This has been the longest I've ever been with any job. Um, and I always believe um, that, there comes a point in an organization where like I feel like I've given everything that I can. And that um, in order to grow and develop, I need to like clock out so someone else can clock in and do their magic and bring their touch and whatever they've learned. And I'm getting to that point now. And my boss is like super aware. Like her and I have had conversations about this, and um, like for me, like that's like I've been very very transparent with her. Um, so I think I'm gonna go back to school actually, and my hope is going back and really studying this area of social justice and like how do we figure out how young people can own critical conversations and grow and learn from them. Like I would love to be able to work not just with one school, but work with many schools to, or many youth programs that are out there to to help them really try to integrate this piece around building a more pluralistic environment for their young people in their program, because that will affect the world, I think, in many different ways, and even helping organizations do that. So maybe even coming back to SMU if there are still opportunities to engage in conversations in that space.
I think we would love that, but and I can't speak on behalf of SMU. But that would be really great.
Yeah.
So do you intend on being involved with SMU? Do you serve on any alumni boards?
Hmm. Yeah, I do serve on a board, and I'm like I don't know. I guess being involved is all relative too, right? I can say I'm pretty involved, but for me, it seems like it's pretty involved. Um, so I serve on a board right now. One of the organizations that I mentioned, Leadership Consultant Council. When I was president of that organization, we received an endowment, um, and over the past, I think, 3 or 4 years now, I've served on like the endowment board. So we essentially help with determining the budget and programming and where funding goes and this and that. Um, it's been a really great experience being able to be connected with an organization that I was so connected with. Um, I do come back to campus every now and then whenever they want someone to speak, and they think that I would be a good speaker. But yeah, those are ways that I stay involved, and then financially, I do contribute to the university as well.
Awesome. So as we're wrapping up, is there anything that I missed that you'd like to discuss about your time at SMU, or just any last thoughts?
No, I mean I think that like I appreciate all the questions. I appreciate you letting me share my story. I yeah, I do I genuinely believe that SMU played a huge part in my life. Not just because of where I am working right now, but also like my perspectives in terms of um, my social network, um, and just how who I am, like what's at my very core. It helped shape some of that as well. So yes.
That is awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your stories with us. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you.